Hey, what's going on? This is a whole lot of Kalamata. I wanted to make a video because it's been a hot minute since I did one of these. This is my buddy right here, Shaman. My name is Cameron. This is going to be a Bible reading of Genesis, but it has been a long time since I've done one of these. It's just been a matter of one, getting a new job. You might even be able to hear in my voice from under the weather. A lot of different things. I had some t-shirts made for my company, which is Instillable LLC. It's a multimedia company, if you will. That's kind of what I've branded it as of right now. But wanted to do a lot with that and wanted to put out more music. Been putting out a lot of shorts on YouTube. Been looking into a lot of different things musically in terms of AI. Um, Venus Theory put out a really interesting video in terms of copyrights and AI recently, so I was catching up on that. And just kind of trying to sit back and write, try to get some more poetry in there. So a lot of different things going on. Just a matter of trying to one, accomplish it all, but also hold it all down. Lots to read in the Bible, lots to understand, lots to write on, and lots of psychological exploratory surgery to kind of go through as an addict, but also as a follower of Christ, as a person just trying to mature and better themselves. And then also just get to that point where I can be comfortable when I'm writing as a perfectionist, trying to encapsulate and really fine tune what I'm trying to say. I think that there's so much that goes into writing that we really don't give it credit. If you haven't in your life taken the time to either write a poem, write a haiku, write a whatever, write a song, I would encourage you, just even if you don't have a beat or if you don't have a melody, try doing that sometime and try to make it meaningful. The reason for my asking of you to do that is just to see how difficult it is. It's kind of like for drums. I was watching this thing on Drumeo, and this guy is absolutely phenomenal. All the comments, are just blowing up with praise, and it's awesome. Like, just to think about how much time, effort, and sacrifice, all his blood, sweat, and tears that went into getting to that level as he had to progress. But I just find myself still without an appreciation for it. So I feel like I'd have to pick up some drumsticks and just try to bust out the most out of time kind of rendition of whatever's going in my head, or a replication of that, just to kind of get just a semblance of what that person goes through. So I think that's important. But anyways, enough about the rambling, kind of a little bit of the channel updates, just because I've been uploading a lot of YouTube shorts. That's new for me. Haven't been one to do that before, but I think it's kind of cool just to see the medium, because I know that's what's popping, that's what's blowing up right now. Anywho, I'm going to get to it. So I did want to give proper salutations and say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this, and God bless. We're going to be reading out of the Holy Bible, as you can see here, but it is the LSV. This is free to download. Check the link below. We are going to be in page 20, if I can get there. Perfect. Chapter 17 is going to be starting out in verse 1. And Abram is a son of 99 years, and Yahweh appears to Abram and says to him, I am God Almighty. Habitually walk before me and be perfect. And I give my covenant between me and you, and multiply you very exceedingly. And Abram falls on his face, and God speaks with him, saying, behold, my covenant is with you, and you have become a father of a multitude of nations. And your name is no longer called Abram, but your name has been Abraham, for father of a multitude of nations have I made you. I'm just going to pause right there for verse 5 specifically. The commentary in the MacArthur ESV Bible that I'm also going to be using today. Some of the commentary I think is important. A lot of it is fluff, just from at least some of what I'm seeing here today. Doesn't mean all of it's fluff, just means some of it not necessarily going to give a wealth of insight. Some of it is opinion based. So just keep that in mind. That being said, 17:5, your name shall be Abram or Abraham, the name meaning father of many nations. So we see that there. but just specifically giving credence to what that name is. Why is God renaming from Abram to Abraham? It's because he is keeping his promise, his covenant. That's what the covenant means, with Abram, saying, I'm going to make you have plenty of people to follow after. Your lineage is going to be a very lasting legacy, or very impactful lasting legacy. And so that's why the name change. So important call out and distinction. Picking it back in verse 6, and have made you exceedingly fruitful, and made you become nations, and kings go out from you. And I have established my covenant between me and you and your seed after you throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant to become God to you and to your seed after you. And I have given to you and to your seed after you the land of your sojournings, the whole land of Canaan, for a continuous possession, and I have become their God. And God says to Abraham now, God says to Abraham, and you keep my covenant, you and your seed after you throughout their generations. In other words, I'm going to bless you, but you need to keep me as your guide. I'm not going to keep my blessings going on. It is a relational exchange. I don't really think that, some people might say, conditional love, but at the end of the day, it's just, no, if you love somebody as part of the relationship, you are going to render due respect. And a lot of that is going to be time and attention. Lord knows that I'm fallible on that. Maybe I need to do better with my relationships, mainly my fiance, but also my friends. Maybe I need to be better at giving them that undevoted, or I'm sorry, the devoted, non-divided attention. But yeah, God says to Abraham, and you keep my covenant, you and your seed after you throughout your generations. Verse 10, this is my covenant which you keep between me and you and your seed after you. Every male of you is to be circumcised. So part of the conditions of that honoring, or that following. Verse 11, and you have circumcised the flesh of your foreskin, and it has become a token of your covenant between me and you. And a son of 8 days is circumcised by you, every male throughout your generations, born in the house or bought with money from any son of a stranger, who is not of your seed. He is certainly circumcised who is born in your house or bought with your money, and my covenant has become in your flesh a perpetual covenant. So it's kind of almost like a branding, for a lack of a better word there, but it's important actually, because there are health benefits there. I'm not certain if it says it in here. There we go. On verse 11, a sign of the covenant, circumcision, cutting away of the male foreskin, was not entirely new in this period of history, but the special religious and theocratic significance then applied to it was entirely new, thus identifying the circumcised as belonging to the physical and ethnical lineage of Abram. Without divine revelation, the rite would not have had this distinctive significance. Thus it remained a theocratic distinction of Israel. There was a health benefit. Since disease could be kept in the folds of the foreskin so that removing it prevented that, historically Jewish women have had the lowest rate of cervical cancer. So God knew what he was doing. I think that's beautiful in the sense of, when we unpack a lot of the dynamics, the nature of a marriage, there is supposed to be a servitude, your attention rendered under God, and your servitude and your attention rendered to your wife. That's part of that balancing act. But by listening to God, God is blessing Abraham, but also blessing the woman in turn, and giving them clean health. So something pretty cool there, honestly, when you think about it. Going into verse 15. Actually, no, I think it's verse 14 that I picked them on. Verse 14, in an uncircumcised one, a male, the flesh of whose foreskin is not circumcised, indeed, that person has been cut off from his people. My covenant he has broken. Verse 15, and God says to Abraham, Sarai, your wife, you do not call her name Sarai, therefore Sarah is her name. And I think the difference in the meaning of the name, they say your princess for Sarai, and Sarah means just princess, so slight difference. Um, and I have blessed her and have also given to you a son from her. And I have blessed her, and she has become nations. Kings of peoples are from her. And Abraham falls on his face and laughs and says in his heart, is one born to the son of one 100 years old? Is one born to the son of 100 years? Kind of an interesting way to say it, but I think the original way that I said it sounds a little better. Or does Sarah, the daughter of 90 years, bear? And Abram says to God, oh, that Ishmael may live before you. So Abraham is saying, hey, you're not going to give me a kid, just take Ishmael. Ishmael is already here. You don't need to do that, essentially. And he's in essence laughing at God. It's showing his non-belief. It's showing his doubt. And so that's actually important coming up here. Verse 19, and God says, your wife Sarah is certainly bearing a son to you, and you have called his name Isaac. Isaac means, and he laughs. And I have established my covenant with him for a perpetual covenant to his seed after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and made him fruitful and multiplied him very exceedingly. 12 princes does he beget, and I have made him become a great nation. In my covenant I establish with Isaac. So this is very telling when we talk about where God's people come from. That gets thrown around a lot, and I think it's done in a very chauvinistic, unhumble way that does not showcase any semblance of the love that the new covenant came to address. So I just want to be cognizant that while we're addressing this element, this is kind of like, a super sensitive topic. People just wilding out like, oh my gosh, guys, people they're losing their mind. I get it. I'm reading God's words, and I want God's words to be God's words. I don't want you to wow out about what somebody else says in relation to what God said. So keep it in mind. We're focusing here on what the biblical context says. I just want people to be aware, if somebody does that in a non-gracious, non-humble fashion, where they're rubbing it in, I don't think that was God's intention. But we do need to draw a clear distinction for what God had voiced. That being said, if people want to go crazy in terms of their theories and their whatever, that's them. That's for their channel. That's not for this channel. Going to verse 21. In my covenant I established with Isaac, whom Sarah does bear to you at this appointed time. So he's going to bless both, is the ultimate takeaway. Ishmael, which ends up becoming the Palestinian people, which in the previous episode, the Israelite people were called Palestinian for a long time too. Historically speaking, if you go back and look at their passports prior to 1948. Plus, I think there was like other things like money too, but regardless, Ishmael's getting blessed, Isaac's getting blessed, so not a terribly big deal. But the covenant is going to continue with Isaac, whom Sarah does bear to you at this appointed time in the next year. And he finishes speaking with him, and God goes up from Abraham. So God leaves, and Abraham takes his son Ishmael and all those born in his house and all those bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcises the flesh of their foreskin in this very same day, as God has spoken with him. So an important distinction there. You're noticing Abraham being given a new name, Sarai being given Sarah, and his reaction of laughter saying, like, you can't do that. You won't do that. Like it's this incredulous disbelief. So there's disbelief and disobedience in the sense that you can't do this. And then on the same token, God doubles down and says, "You've little faith, believe." And then ends up as a result of God saying, "You will have a line, you will call him Isaac," which is God saying, "You want to laugh at me? Fine, I'm going to make your first kid he who laughs." That's what Isaac means. From there, you see immediate obedience. So there's juxtaposition going on in the chapter: disobedience, disbelief, and then right same day as it says in the scripture, obedience. Very interesting just to kind of see how God's interaction with man post-fall creates this juxtaposition of that without that interaction, we would probably not have obedience. We'd probably continue on in our disbelief. And so that, I think, is really part of our identity or our forging of faith. That if you look at the Bible and you actually begin to highlight the different lines back and forth, and you compare someone's disbelief to belief right after God does something, it's pretty phenomenal just to kind of see the trajectory, just this course correction that starts going in the direction that God wants. And all this time, all these other avenues of approach they were thinking of taking, and then it's like, nope, you're going to go this way. So you can just see God's hand ultimately bless someone through this course correction. But the point is to have obedience follow. That's part of that relationship. Going on to, it looks like, verse 24. And Abraham is a son of 99 years in the flesh, of his foreskin being circumcised, and his son Ishmael is a son of 13 years in the flesh of his foreskin being circumcised. That must have sucked. Whether you're 99 years old or 13 years old, that must have sucked. And in this very same day, Abraham has been circumcised, and his son Ishmael, and all the men of his house, born in the house and bought with money from the son of a stranger, have been circumcised with him. A bit repetitious, yes, but that's chapter 17. God is setting the stage for what is to come. Out of the sin, out of the disobedience, we find there is course correction that is needed, there is relational understanding that is needed, and a rectifying. So that's what God's doing. God is course correcting. Picking up in chapter 18, verse 1. And Yahweh appears to him among the oaks of Mamre, and he is sitting at the opening of the tent, about the heat of the day. And he lifts up his eyes and looks, and behold, 3 men standing by him. And he sees and runs to meet them from the opening of the tent, and bows himself toward the earth. And he says, My Lord, if now I have found grace in your eyes, please do not pass on from your servant. If I have been rightful in following out what you instructed me to do as per the previous chapter, do not pass on from your servant. Talked about that servitude earlier. We have verse 4. Please let a little water be accepted and wash your feet and recline under the tree, and I bring a piece of bread and support your heart. Afterward, pass on, for therefore you have passed over to your servant. And they say, So may you do as you have spoken. And Abraham hurries toward the tent to Sarah and says, Hurry, 3 measures of flour meal, knead and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd and takes a son of the herd, tender and good, and gives to the young man, and he hurries to prepare it. A son of the herd, specifically like a piece of cattle, but it's a youngling, little, I don't know, as they say, kid for goat, which is like really weird. It's like, why are you calling a child goat kid? But hey man, I don't make the words, I just know them. Regardless, verse 8. And he takes butter and milk and the son of the herd which he has prepared, and sets before them, and he is standing by them under the tree, and they eat. And they say to him, Where is Sarah your wife? And he says, Behold, in the tent. And he says, returning, I return to you about the time of life, and behold, to Sarah your wife a son. And Sarah is listening at the opening of the tent, which is behind him. And Abraham and Sarah are aged, they're old, entering into days. The way of woman has ceased to be in Sarah. And Sarah laughs in her heart, saying, After I have waxed old, have I had pleasure? My Lord is also old. Now she's literally saying, I'm old as dirt. I get sex. Like that's literally what that is. Just in case the waxed and waned and language is a little bit out there. It's interesting seeing like kind of the Old English or the literal translation, but it's kind of got a little bit of old English poetic flair if you got the swagger for it, you know. Verse 13, and Yahweh says to Abraham, why is this? Sarah has laughed, saying, is it really true? I bear children, and I am aged? Is anything too wonderful for Yahweh? At the appointed time I return to you about the time of life, and Sarah has a son. And Sarah denies, saying, I did not laugh, for she has been afraid. And he says, no, but you did laugh. So, looking at other versions like the ESV, this is kind of like a really weird way, but God is actually saying, why is Sarah laughing? Why is she questioning me? Is anything really outside of my grasp to do? Is it really that incredulous? Is really that, that flesh being incapable? After the fall, when you think about it, it's like, wow, people are 700, 900 years, and now we got these people that are like 100 years, and God's gonna call them pregnant. He's like, it's just, they're so used to the way of the world that they can't even believe God. So the disbelief is not only apparent, in Abraham, but now this next chapter, it's apparent in Sarah. And she actually argues kind of a little bit back and forth, saying, I didn't laugh, or I didn't doubt you, for she's been afraid, and then says, no, but you did laugh. Going on to verse 16. And the men rise from there and look on the face of Sodom, and Abraham is going with them to send them away. So kind of like walking them to the car, kind of walking them to where they're going to go do their business of, you'll find out shortly. Abraham is going with them to send them away, and Yahweh says, am I concealing from Abraham that which I am doing? And Abraham certainly becomes a great and mighty nation. Blessed in him have been all nations of the earth. For I have known him, and that he commands his children and his house after him, and they have kept the way of Yahweh, to do righteousness and judgment, that Yahweh may bring on Abraham, which he has spoken concerning him. I think, just reading that, I think that's honestly a conversation he's having with the angels, because it's not just God there. There's three men. I think it's God with part of his heavenly council. That goes back to some of the previous videos where there is a gentleman that wrote The Unseen Realm. That's the book I'm thinking of. And there is that YouTube video that you can watch as well, but it is by Michael S. Heiser. I'm always blanking on his name, but it's because I have not read that book. I have watched the YouTube video. I think that divine counsel, that heavenly counsel, it's kind of further elaborated there as far as the Bible and the unseen realm. So when we look at verses, specifically 18 or 17 to, I would say, 19, I feel like God is talking with his heavenly counsel right then and there. Could be up for debate, but the three men are very apparent right there. My cat sees a bird. It's burb time. Bourbon. He's just bourbon hard. Where is that? Three men standing by him. So yeah, picking it up in verse 20. And Yahweh says, the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah became great, and their sin became exceedingly grievous. It does say the word because. I'm substituting the word became because it does not roll off the tongue as well. Because great, because exceedingly grievous. It's a literal translation, and it's literally a little weird in terms of the English language. Keep that in mind, written in Greek, and before that, Aramaic. And I'm just talking about in terms of New Testament and then Old Testament. This is Old Testament that we're in. But going from there, verse 21, I go down now and see whether according to its cry, which is coming to me, they have done completely. And if not, I know. So God is saying, I'm going to go down there. I'm going to investigate all these cries, all this lamentation, all this petitioning through prayer. If it's really as bad as they say it is, I will know. Quite intriguing on, honestly, a couple of different accounts, because it's like the fact that God is going out of his way to step down from his heavenly throne, or at least sending an angel through who he can see the eyes of or experience in some heavenly fashion. What is going on there? It's just intriguing because we don't always hear that in the biblical narrative about God investigating, or at least the syntax of the sentence saying, I'm going to evaluate to see if the prayers are correct in the sense of an injustice being committed against people. It's kind of phenomenal just when we think about that. By all means, somebody correct me in the comments section if there's another way to approach that. Verse 22, and the men turn from there and go towards Sodom. And Abraham is yet standing before Yahweh. And Abraham draws near and says, do you also consume righteous with wicked? Going to get a little repetitious here, just as a forewarning. Verse 24, perhaps there are 50 righteous in the midst of the city. Do you also consume and not bear with the place for the sake of the 50 righteous who are in this midst? Will you not tolerate the city and keep it standing for the sake of 50 righteous who are in the midst? Far be it from you to do according this thing, to put to death the righteous with the wicked, that it has been as the righteous, so the wicked. Far be it from you, does the judge of all the earth not do justice? And Yahweh says, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous in the midst of the city, then I have borne with all the place for their sake. I will bear letting the city still do its thing if I can find 50 righteous. And Abraham answers and says, now behold, I have willed to speak to the Lord, and I am dust and ashes. So it's kind of, the syntax is weird, or at least the structure, because it's like humility is coming after his, quite frankly, ballsy question. It's kind of like, far be it from you to do this, but I'm just ash and dust. It's kind of like, okay, they were talking about the creator, the author of life and death, the author of everything, the author of all. And you're jumping conclusions. So I think that if we were to psychologically unpack that, there is a bit in the MacArthur Bible that actually speaks to this. So keep that in mind. There's a psychological thing. I'm going to continue because we're not quite there. We're almost there. I think another 2 verses. Yahweh says, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous in the midst of the city, then I have borne with all the place for their sake. I will bear with their place. Verse 27, Abraham answers and says, now behold, I have willed to speak to the Lord, and I am dust and ashes. Perhaps there are lacking 5 of the 50 righteous. Do you destroy for 5 the whole of the city? And he says, I do not destroy it, if I find there 45 people that are righteous. 29, and he adds again to speak to him and says, perhaps there are found there 40 people. And he says, I do not do it because of the 40. So they're just whittling down going on, like, would you do for 50? Would you do for 45? Would you do it for 40? And that continues. He says, please let it not be displeasing to the Lord. Sorry for testing your patience. And I speak, perhaps there are found there 30. And he says, I will not do it if I find 30. And he says, now behold, I have willed to speak to the Lord. Perhaps there are found there 20. And he says, I do not destroy it because of 20. And he says, please let it not be displeasing to the Lord. And I speak only this time. Perhaps there are found there 10. God responds, I do not destroy it because of the 10. And Yahweh goes on when he has finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham has turned back to his place. Some of the commentary, specifically from the MacArthur ESV Bible, chapter 18, verse 27, I am but dust and ashes. Abraham's negotiation, far from being crassly or selfishly manipulative, humbly and compassionately, like, again, they kind of go a little bit hard in the paint with their, I don't know, opinion or dissertation kind of on what's going on, at least with the adjectives. Expressed his concern for people and particularly interceded for the place where his nephew Lot and his family lived. Neither did he intend to anger the Lord by his repeated requests. Going on to verse 32, Abraham probably had the whole of Lot's family in mind during his petition. So that paints a very different element of why Abraham's doing this. He's like doing it specifically for Lot. And I think when we talk about that psychological element of, hey, by the way, would you not do this? I'm just ash and dust. I mean, I'm just humbly speaking, like, he's speaking out of turn because he's doing like a gut punch reaction, like, hey, don't do that. Well, actually, I have no right to question you. That's how it reads. And I think it reads that way on purpose because of the fact that it was Lot that he was trying to defend and ultimately save. We're going to pick it up in chapter 19. There's a lot more going on here. I wish you could see the highlights in my Bible. It's a friggin' war zone. Yeah. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll try to make that a little bit bigger post-edit. Let's go here. Chapter 19. And two of the messengers come towards Sodom at evening, and Lot is sitting at the gate of Sodom, and Lot sees and rises to meet them and bows himself face to the earth. And he says, now behold, my lords, please turn aside of the house of your servant and lodge and wash your feet, and then you have risen early and gone on your way. And they say, no, but we lodge in the broad place. Some other translations will say public square or town square. Verse 3, and he presses on them greatly, and they turn aside to him and come into his house, and he makes a banquet for them and has baked unleavened things, and they eat. Going on to verse 4. Verse 4, before they lie down, the men of the city, men of Sodom, have surrounded the house from young even to aged, all the people from the extremity. And they call to Lot and say to him, where are the men who have come to you tonight? Bring them out to us, and we know them. This we know them is often used in Genesis regarding sexuality, to know and be known. It's just showcasing how bad Sodom and Gomorrah is. These guys literally want to rape these angels, and it's showcasing how defiled, how selfish they are. There is commentary in the MacArthur ESV Bible, but I'm also speaking out of experience as an addict myself, who has gone to several different support groups, have been in several different Bible studies. I've also been to Celebrate Recovery. I've looking into other ones, gotten personal one-on-one counseling. Sexuality, as well as the research I've done, is inherently selfish when uncontrolled. So there is, specifically talking on verse 4, this commentary from the MacArthur ESV Bible, the widespread nature of Sodom's moral perversion received emphasis both from the additional qualifiers used, all the people to the last man, and both young and old, and the request made that we may know them, even acknowledging legitimate exaggeration in this use of all, this indeed was a wicked city. So I just want to unpack that a little bit. In the times that we're in, where unrestrained sexuality is on a parade and ultimately given over to this hedonistic mindset of do whatever you want, as you please. I'm sorry, but same-sex attraction, having, multiple partners or whatever sexuality, you want to say it's fluid, you want to say you're a Pokemon, I don't care how you identify. At the end of the day, you're being selfish because you're saying, I want to entertain this. And I'm saying that as a sex addict. I'm saying that as a porn addict. I'm saying that as somebody who has had unrestrained life or unrestrained sexual urges burn their life. So if you need to point the finger at somebody and you want to point two middle fingers, that's great. But I'm just saying I'm in the same boat as you if that's currently where you're at. So I'm not pulling any punches and I really don't care. Why? Because I'm on my own recovery path. It's not that I am better than you. It's not that, oh, he reads the Bible, so he's like, no. Quit spinning a narrative in your head and take ownership for your actions, because at the end of the day, that's what I'm having to do. That's why I was paying $120 per session for therapy. That's why I went and spent 7 months at Celebrate Recovery doing a step studies program. It's not fun. But then when I look at my actions and my choices of where I'm at and why I didn't develop certain skills and attributes and burn off certain character traits that weren't healthy for me, it's because I spent way longer in sin, ending up becoming somebody I didn't want to be. I robbed myself out of my peace, my sleep, and my potential. Those are never good things to have robbed out of you. So I'm just saying, speaking as somebody who's gone out of his way to try and befriend the person who is trans and ended up having a great rapport and relationship. If you can have something outside of the mob mentality and you can actually have respect, I have family members or friends that struggle with same-sex attraction. It's not about beating them down. It's about meeting them where they're at and having a right standing relationship. Right standing relationship means we're reflecting the honor of God as far as his original design. But secondly, under that, you're not beating them down. You're showcasing love to your neighbor. Love the Lord thy God with all thy mind, body, heart, and soul. And then love thy neighbor. It's not hard, but we complicate it. We say, oh, there's an exception. There's gray areas and they were born this way. And guess what? That might be part of their testimony if they were born that way. Whatever excuse you want to give, I'm certain that there's another justification that the Christians can give. If you want to have on the Christian side, well, I have the right to have a bullhorn and then I can go ahead and judge people. No, you're wrong, because there's no verse inside this thing that says you're allowed to judge people. Show me the verse. There isn't one. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have limits. You don't have boundaries. Of course, somebody who's walking in a right standing relationship with God is going to have boundaries. So I know I'll get off my soapbox and I'll make this back on the Bible, but I'm just saying, at the end of the day, these guys in Sodom and Gomorrah are literally saying, I want to gang rape. I want to have, my sexual feelings unrestrained, completely expressed. And they're asking to have sex with angels. Bro, this is not about like, hey, come to my casa, like chill and let me show you around town. No, this is Lot suddenly needs to protect somebody because of the fact that they're literally that wicked and abhorrent here that they are instantly wanting to have sex. They're just jumping right into the like sexual perversity that is incredibly selfish. So going back to the text, this is even going to get worse. So I'm just letting you know, if anything I've said has offended you by now, it only gets worse from here. Viewer discretion advised. Verse 6, and Lot goes out to them into the opening, so the door, and the door has shut behind him, and says, please, my brothers, do not do evil. Now behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known anyone. Please let me bring them out to you, and do to them as is good in your eyes. Only do nothing to these men, for therefore they have come in within the shadow of my roof. I've brought these people in, they are guests, and being the piece of crap that Lot is, he's morally bankrupt. Sodom and Gomorrah has had a negative impact with him dwelling inside of it, because he's obviously clearly going to give up or willing to give up his daughters over to these men who want to rape other men, who are so hot with lust that they can't see anything else but their own desires. They're consumed with their own desires. I've been that way. I know what that's like when everything is so solely focused on the sexuality. That's the weird thing. Now, I'm a straight white male. I get it. Go ahead, label me, brand me, whatever you need to do in terms of your little worldview, because you can't necessarily see the heart context that we're going to talk about here shortly. But in the Bible later, it does talk about a heart that is a stony or calcified heart, and you are asking God for a new heart. Would you replace this stone heart this calcified heart that I have, and would you ultimately give me a new heart, one of flesh? So one that's obviously a proper beating heart, but it's talking about your psyche. Cliff Nechtel uses the term to sear your conscience, and that's exactly what this is. These people are so hot with lust, they have seared their conscience. If you actually know anything about the limbic system inside of the brain, when you sear that, you end up eroding away one of the mental faculties that essentially gives you choice. It's the pleasure reward center specifically, and that ends up harming your ability to make ethical choices. So sexuality, when unrestrained, ends up becoming an issue. You rob yourself out of your potential. You end up engaging in behavior that's not good because of the fact that you want it now, unrestrained, not prolonged. You live for that instantaneous gratification, and it will kill you. I'm just speaking from experience. I'm speaking for somebody who literally, oh wow, I tried the military, didn't work. Tried college, didn't work. Tried the jobs, didn't work. A lot of things didn't work for me. And that's because one size does not fit all. But I was unwilling to carve out my own path and step out of my own way because I was so addicted to my way of living. Wanted to be a sex addict, wanted to be a porn addict, wanted to be all these different things. Now you can take those labels and be like, oh, you're a piece of crap, you're what? I don't get my identity from you, dude. I get my identity from God. I read the Bible because I know that there is a bigger purpose. There is more going on in the world. I'll get off my soapbox, but I'm letting you know I'm presenting all this because there's actually something to learn. There's something to dissect. Lot is being incredibly wicked and abhorrent. He's been morally compromised. His heart has become hardened on the circumstances, and he's doing a good thing. He's rushing to the angel's defense. On the same token, in that rush to the defense, he's doing a really wicked and abhorrent thing by presenting, hey, just take my daughters. They haven't known men. And it's like, what kind of father does that? Are you out your flipping mind? Like, bro, like if given the opportunity, I'm sorry, you want to be given over to your lusts? Like, if you really loved your own daughters, you would throw yourself on the grenade, so to speak. But I'm just saying, like, the angels are there to rescue Lot. That ain't gonna happen. So, going back to the text, verse 9, and they say, come near here. They also say, this one has come to sojourn, and he certainly judges. Now we do evil to you more than to them. And they press against the man, against Lot greatly, and come near to break the door. So, the dude's wiling out, the guy's having a problem. They ultimately, the ones that are wanting sex, say, you are journeying, that sojourn word right there, you are journeying to our place, you come to my roof, my town, and you are judging us. You angels, you messengers, come to do this. Really? Like, nah, you're not gonna hold me up from what I want. So that's exactly what's going on. Now we do evil to you, referring to Lot, more than to them. So we're gonna take out our frustration on you, Lot, because you are interceding on their behalf. Do you understand the dynamics that's going on right now? Let's break that down. Angels sent from heaven on high down to earth have stepped off the heavenly throne of whatever position they're given. God might be there in the mix because it clearly says there in chapter 18, or God is working through a angel of the Lord or messenger of the Lord. They are interceding on Lot's behalf. Now Lot is interceding for them. This topsy-turvy element that we're seeing play out here is because of the fall. Things are not in right order. The men are wanting to have sex with men. The man is rushing to the defense of the angels. And these angels are messengers sent by God to come to the defense of man. So there's a lot going on right here. He's giving up his daughters. He's supposed to protect his daughters. So do you see the tumultuous nature that's going on here? Like, if you're not getting that based off of what I'm reading to you, that's kind of what the Bible is showcasing, why we need a savior. Because you'd ask yourself, why so Why is so wicked and abhorrent acts depicted in the Bible? Why is that important to read? Because it's demonstrating that left to our own devices, we'll become an addict. We'll become someone we don't want to be. And I think it's really important that we recognize, even though these men, they're being gay and Christians do not have the right, I will just say on this last bit, Christians do not have the right to have a megaphone and go to any gay parade and lambast and bash on people. You don't have a right. Show me the Bible verse where it talks about you have the right to judge people. It's not in there. It's not. Secondly, gay people, if you were actually allowed unions and the insurance companies actually respected your unions and actually gave you insurance benefits, instead of being the cheap bank that they are and running all these kind of what are essentially backdoor politics saying, well, it's not really a marriage and we don't really recognize your union. You could have had unions and it would have been perfectly fine, but insurance companies didn't recognize it. So when you go to ride in the ambulance, when you go to cover somebody medically, when you go to do anything, the insurance companies are standing in the way like, nah, you're a second-class citizen. We want to be prejudiced and we want to hold you in some kind of contempt where we can financially benefit from your suffering. If we ended up respecting people, again, I have friends that are same-sex attraction. I have family members that are same-sex attraction. It is what it is. You're still supposed to love that person. Love the Lord thy God with all thy mind, body, heart, and soul is commandment 1. Commandment 2 is love thy neighbor. It's not easy, but how do we get in a right standing relationship? It means walking in integrity. I got to be friends with somebody who had transition from man to woman. And unfortunately, I don't hang out with them today just because they're very busy. I'm very busy. Doesn't mean I don't want to. Just means that, hey, sometimes we're around in a person's life for a certain set of time. You might want to make use of that time and get to know that person. Because when that person walked in integrity at work and I asked them to do something, it became so much more impactful and so much more important to me that I listen to that person, that I BS with that person and find common ground, find the commonality. Because when we strip out the mob mentality, you just have so much better of a time. Because now it's, I know that person. Now that person has a name. Now that person's the homie. Now that person's the friend. Rather than defining them by one choice. Because that singular identifier as far as what your sexuality is, anybody flying around that flag will never admit. But they want groupthink because of the fact that they feel blessed and they feel welcomed when they find people that are like-minded and echo back the same voice of what they're saying. But the problem is that if that's all they identify themselves on, the entire bandwidth of a person, of what they can grow into, of who they can become, what skills they can adapt to, the environment around themselves, how they can make another person feel with their words, with their etiquette, with their ability to view the situation and make helpful comments or constructive criticism. All these other elements take a backseat to that single element of sexuality. And that's the problem, is that you do not grow there. You do not express anything outside of that sexuality. So it's literally an inversion. God made the ability for mankind to have multiple levels. You don't stay stuck as a child unless you choose to stay stuck as a child. And unfortunately, that's what it's doing. It's saying, I'm going to put my pleasure and how I derive that pleasure above anything else, and I'm going to make it my identity. That's sad as someone who has lived that. It's sad because at the end of the day, that person offers so much more. It's not just that. They offer a wealth, a plethora of different aspects. And when that becomes a soul-consuming conversation bit, and that's the only thing you can talk about, it's sad. Because now you're robbed out of true connection. Now the mental health rate plummets that much further. Don't believe me? Go watch the documentaries. The people that are 40, 50 years old that paid for the transition are saying to the kids who are 14, 20, whatever, however old they are, saying, hey, you don't know if you want this. It's not really going to fix a lot of things. Go look at the people that post-op, after they get their surgery, after they do all these things. What's the suicide rate? Go look into it. Go look into it. It ends up being like 60 some odd percent last time I read a medical journal on it. It's frightening. So back to the topic at hand. I know that's a lot, but I'm saying we need to be cognizant about what's going on here with Lot and this topsy-turvy nature and why we need a savior, why we need another human heart, because this is what's going on in the world right now. And it's saying it's going to be just like the days of Noah in the end times. I don't know if it's the end times or not. I'm going to leave that up to God because only he knows the hour. But it's important to at least understand how to reach somebody in a loving manner while we're here. So hope that makes sense. Let's get back at it. So this one has come to sojourn. You have journeyed to our place. These angels have come to our place and they are judging us. We're going to do more wicked abhorrence. We're going to do more acts of evil against you, Lot, for interceding for these angels. And they come and try to break down the door. And the men put forth their hand and bring in Lot to them. They bring him in to the house and have shut the door. And to the men who are at the opening of the house, they have struck with blindness. So they're with one hand reaching in, they're casting out light or some form of a heavenly act to cause blindness. From the small, or from small even to great. So they've blinded the youngest to the oldest, essentially, and they weary themselves to find the opening. What does it mean? They are still groping around trying to have their own sexual relations with the angels, even after they've been blinded. Remember what I talked about? That soul focus, that soul identifier, when you are that selfish, you've literally been blinded mercifully. You could have been drawn and four-quartered. You could have been hung out to dry with all your entrails spilling out of your guts. You could have been killed. You could all these, like, that's mercy. But that's the equivalent of getting flash banged and then literally still being like, all right, let's have sex. And you're just like, head's just bobbing all around and you can't see nothing. So I'm just saying, like, that's how focused on their sin they are. That's how that's how in bad of a shape they are and how much in need they are of a new heart. God is saying, like, these people are refusing to do anything but their wickedness. And that's why he's going to destroy the city. So let's just be honest. That's what's going on. Verse 12, and the men say to Lot, whom have you here still? Son-in-law, your sons also, and your daughters, and all whom you have in the city. Bring out from this place. Bring out from this place. For we are destroying this place, for their cry has been great before the face of Yahweh, and Yahweh does send us to destroy it. Right there. They're there to destroy it. If there's any doubt as to what I'm claiming and what the Bible's saying, is right there. They're there to destroy it. Verse 14, Lot goes out and speaks to his sons-in-law, those taking his daughters, and says, rise, go out from this place, for Yahweh is destroying the city. And he is seen as one. He is as one, mocking in the eyes of his son-in-laws. They're like, nah, man, you just playing. That ain't true. Nah, they don't believe him. Now keep in mind, this man gave up his credibility. This man gave up his integrity. He was just offering to men that wanted to rape other men his own daughters, who are virgins. And here are the son-in-laws, maybe men that the daughters are engaged to, and he's talking to them. It's like, dude, you literally were just about to give your daughters up, and now you're talking to them. Yeah, you have lost credibility. Of course they're going to be thinking, no, I don't believe you at all. Going on. Verse 15, and when the dawn has ascended, then the messengers press on Lot, saying, rise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are found present, lest you are consumed in the iniquity of the city. So great is the sin that they're going to be destroyed with it, so they have to flee. What does Lot do? And he lingers. And the men lay hold on his hand and on the hand of his wife. The messengers take hold of his hand and on the hand of his wife, and on the hand of his 2 daughters, through the mercy of Yahweh, through the mercy of God to him, and they bring him out and cause him to rest outside the city. You're not listening. We have interceded for you. We have stepped off heaven's throne. We have journeyed to your place. We have come to you specifically to save you out of this wicked, abhorrent city, and you're not listening. We've told you we are now going to take you. And it comes to pass, when he has brought them outside, that he says, escape for your life. Do not look behind you. That do not look behind you is very important. Nor stand in all the circuits. Escape to the mountains, lest you are consumed. Do not look behind you, lest you are consumed. Verse 18, and Lot says to them, oh, not so, my lord. Bro, give it up. Nope, doubles down on his idiocy. Verse 19, now behold, your servant has found grace in your eyes, and you make great your kindness, which you have done with me by saving my life. He even recognizes, you are saving my life. And I'm unable to escape to the mountains, lest the evil cleave to me and I have died. I don't really know where he's making that justification. Maybe it's because he's got livestock. He's got people in tow. He's got, all these things. Maybe he's not making it. Maybe he's got a physical ailment. It doesn't say. But in his eyes, he's saying the evil is going to cling to him. He's going to die. Verse 20, now behold, this city is near to flee there, and it is little. Please let me escape. Is it not little? Then my soul may live. And he says to them, behold, I have also accepted your face for this thing without overthrowing the city for which you have spoken. The angel says to him, hey, look here. I will go ahead and grant you your petition to have this city, even though we were going to destroy it. Verse 22, hurry, escape there, for I am not able to do anything until you're entering there. Therefore he calls the name of the city Zor. The sun has gone out on the earth, and Lot entered into Zor, and Yahweh has rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from Yahweh, from the heavens. Now behold, the city is there. That's his petition. He says, behold, I have also accepted your face for this thing without overthrowing the city you have asked. Hurry, escape there, for I'm not able to do anything until you're entering there. Therefore he calls the city Zor. And that's when God rains down on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone, rains down fire. And there are sulfur balls you can still find to this day. I'll link that in the video down below in the description. Verse 25, and he overthrows these cities and all the circuit and all the inhabitants of the cities, that which is shooting up from the ground. And his wife looks from behind him. Remember, what do we say here in verse 17? Escape for your life. Do not look behind you. Verse 26, and his wife looks from behind him, and she becomes a pillar of salt. Obviously, there's supernatural destruction going on. God is saying, don't look back. I've given you a forewarning. I've told you. I've now taken you. I've stepped off my throne. I've given mercy, mercy, mercy. I've blinded these men that are trying to gang rape people. It's at some point you need to listen. You're not listening. Suffer the consequences. Verse 27, and Abraham rises early in the morning to the place where he has stood before the face of Yahweh, and he looks on the face of Sodom and Gomorrah and on all the face of the land of the circuit, and sees, and behold, the smoke of the land went up in smoke of the furnace. And it comes to pass in God's destroying the cities of the circuit that God remembers Abraham and sends Lot out of the midst of the overthrow in the overthrowing the cities in which Lot dwelt. And Lot goes up to Zor and dwells in the mountains, and his 2 daughters with him, for he has been afraid of dwelling in Zor, and he dwells in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. So Lot leaves Zor, again, thinking he knows best. He petitions for the city that was going to be destroyed, basically, right next to Sodom and Gomorrah. And he dwells in the mountains instead with his 2 daughters. Talk about being on your OFP, man, your own freaking program. I mean, good night. Verse 31, and the firstborn says to the younger, that the 2 daughters are talking to each other, our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come into us, that we may know and be known, as is the way of all the earth. Come, we cause our father to drink wine and lie with him and preserve a seed from our father. it's going that route. It's messed up. But for those people that want their Game of Thrones, here we go. Verse 33, and they caused their father to drink wine on that night. And the firstborn goes in and lies with her father, and he has not known in her lying down or in her rising up. Now, I want to call out because there is this to know and be known. He has not known. It's better to put aware there. He has not been made aware in her lying down and in her rising up. He was so plastered after having lost his wife, the tragedy of not listening, of not heeding God, that he literally is super drunk and doesn't know that his own daughters are laying with him. And it comes to pass on the next day that the firstborn says to the younger, behold, I have lain with my father. Last night we also caused him to drink wine tonight and go in and lie with him, and we preserve a seed from our father. And they cause their father to drink wine on the night also, and the younger rises and lies with him, and he doesn't know, or he's not aware, in her lying down or in her rising up. Again, aware just because I don't want people to get confused on the whole to know and be known. 2 verses left, hang in there. And the 2 daughters of Lot conceives from their father, and the firstborn bears a son and calls his name Moab. He is father of Moab to this day. As for the younger, she has also borne a son and calls his name Ben-Ammi. He is father of the sons of Ammon to this day. So wrapping this up with the MacArthur ESV commentary, verse 8, do to them as you please. The constraints of Eastern hospitality and the very purpose for which Lot had invited the visitors, in this case the angels, compelled Lot to offer his daughters for a less deviant kind of wickedness. See notes on Romans chapter 1, verses 24 through 27, so as to protect his guests. The foolish effort shows that while Lot was right with God, later given in 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 7 and 8, he had contented himself with some sins and weak faith rather than leaving Sodom. God was kind and gracious, though, and had ultimately declared him as righteous through his faith in God. The homosexual deviation carries an uncontrollable lust that defies restraint. For verse 9, even when blinded, they try to fulfill their lusts. Verse 16, the Lord being merciful to him, the reason elsewhere described as God having remembered Abraham, is why in the face of seeing Lot's reluctance to leave, he lingered. The angels personally and forcefully escorted him and his family. I was about to say executed him. Maybe that's what I wanted to do. I don't know. Projecting. Escorted him and his family beyond the city's precincts. The angels' reply in verse 21 indicated this city was included in the original judgment plan, but would be spared for Lot's sake. Going for verse 21 here, just to kind of give a little bit of context there. Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. So that's him again granting that mercy and that kindness of him trying to alter the plan. Afraid to live in Zor. Commentary for verse 30. Perhaps because the people there felt he was responsible for all of the devastation, or he feared more judgment on the region might hit the city. So again, doing his own thing, goes up and lives in the mountains. But this is where we're talking about the most abhorrent act of incest here. Not the most abhorrent act, but like an abhorrent act of incest. The immoral philosophy of Sodom and Gomorrah had so corrupted the thinking of Lot's daughters that they had unhesitatingly contrived to be impregnated by their own father. They were virgins, as according to verse 8, and there was no men left for husbands, verse 25. In fearing they would have no children, they conceived this gross iniquity, verses 37 and 38, final commentary. The 2 sons born of incest became the protogenitors of Moab and Ammon, Israel's long-standing enemies. So out of this grows huge strife. So Lot loses his wife, failing to listen. 2 of Israel's huge enemies come out of this. So it's almost like, as we're seeing Abraham's lineage with his new name and Sarah through Ishmael and Isaac, specifically Isaac, because Ishmael will be the Palestinian people. I know that name flip-flopped as we talked about. But Isaac's line will be the nation or the lineage that produces kings and ultimately has God's blessing. There was a blessing of multitude behind Ishmael, but not necessarily God's chosen blessing. So in that, as far as like which line Jesus would come out of, to more specify that. So all of this wicked, horrible, like sexual, angelic, like it's just all over the place, man. It's a mishmash of everything. Why is this even important? Said it earlier, it's because we need a Savior. This is why we need Jesus Christ. If anybody needs a definitive reason as why we need a Savior, this is it right here. Go to one of those parades that's celebrating sexuality and you'll see people don't want to showcase restraint. They don't want to showcase maturity. They don't want to serve one another through life in growth. They want to serve their sexual desires. And it's a vicious cycle feeding unto itself, as opposed something when marriage is done correctly. Not at all claiming I can do marriage correctly, not claiming that I am marriage material. By all means, I got my own faults. But that's kind of the point, is you do take that vow and that covenant, and then you are supposed to grow through what you go through, is what my pastor would say here in Arizona. So, that being said, hope you enjoyed. God bless. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention. And this is a whole lot of Kalamata.